Blessings, my friends. It's Hakeem and this is the Take Back Our Tech Show, the most important tech news stories every week. This is episode number 1. I'm so excited because we have some big stories in the pipeline, and I am really excited to be committed to this podcast, this mini pod. We're going to be covering all these stories and even tech solutions that will change your life, all under 20 minutes. So let's see if I can do this under 20 minutes. So our stories for today, number 1 is what in the hell is Real ID? We know the deadline for using Real ID to fly in the United States was earlier this May. And why do I get patted down at the airport? We are going to answer the questions. Is the Real ID, is it a digital ID? The answer is sort of. It kind of is, it kind of isn't. We'll get into that. We'll get into alternatives of how you can use it. The second story we have is Apple is paying out a new class action lawsuit of $95 million because it listened to a bunch of people having sex and making drug deals without their consent. A whistleblower from 2017 was cited in a new class action case. If you have any Apple device, including your Apple Watch or any Apple device, you could claim some money from this. So if you want to know which devices are the most at risk, and we're finding the most false positives and actually recording conversations, keep listening to the rest of the show. Our third story for the week is the IRS is catching crypto bros lying on their taxes. How did they find out? Well, because Coinbase gave them that data all the way since 2017. It handed over 14,000 information of 14,000 accounts on the Coinbase platform, and this included very personal information such as their taxpayer ID number. So that's how the IRS knows. What can you do about it? Listen on later in the show. The Google antitrust lawsuit, the Department of Justice ruled that Google is having anti-competitive practices in their search engine, and now they're going to move on to the remedy phase of the case, which means they're actually going to sell off Google properties. Is Google Chrome going to be sold off, or how about Google Android? Well, we're going to find out the details, and we're also going to find out how Google suggests that they should be broken up as an antitrust. It's pretty funny to see how they want it. And lastly, today, if you use Bitcoin but want to get into Monero, the truly private cryptocurrency, then I'm going to show you how you can use Unstoppable Swap to quickly and without trusting a third party switch your Monero into Bitcoin. So I want to kick off the first episode in covering why we're doing this show. Now, I am of the belief there's too much news out there. The news cycle is really crazy. There are things going on all the time. I can't keep up with it. So I figured people would appreciate a way to condense down the tech news just into 20 minutes. And most importantly, instead of just being scared and reactive to the news, I thought it was important to bring in solutions. So with every one of the stories we're going to talk about on the TBOT show, we are going to have a solution, something you could do at home, and if I can, I'll actually demonstrate it on the screen. Also, another important part of this is to do actual research and use the primary source documents on these stories whenever possible. So a lot of the times we're going to be looking at government sites. We're going to be looking at court documents and law briefs. So yeah, this is going to be a pretty in-depth show. If you want to follow everything that we're doing, you can go to takebackourtech.org. This is where the podcast is going to be published, along with our Substack. TBOT.substack.com. We will be publishing the audio and video versions of the mini podcast right here. I also want to mention this product we released recently. I'm also the founder of a technology company called Above, and we have a suite of software services, including a VPN to video conferencing and a bunch of other services, and we just added this one as well. This is a file sharing service. If you want to send things securely, you can simply go in here, drop your files, and you'll get a link back. You can protect that link with a password. You can have that link delete the files on the first download. It's really cool. Go to abovephone.com/blog if you want to hear more about it. And you can also buy Above Suite, which is the suite of software services, and get access to Above Share at abovephone.com/suite. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get back to the show. So let's talk about our first story. What in the world is Real ID? You might have seen this on your ID. A lot of states and airports have been pushing forth this propaganda, encouraging people to use the Real ID. It's going to be required now as part of the TSA. And so why are they doing that? Well, this actually goes back a very long time till 9/11. When a lot of things changed. I mean, if you want to understand how the world and specifically US works, you can read this 9/11 Commission report. Of course, this report looked into how the 9/11 terrorist attacks were conducted and made a really broad set of recommendations to improve security so it never happens again. So that's why we have things like TSA. That's also why we have things like facial recognition and these digital IDs that are coming forth. So this is from page 387 in the 9/11 Commission report, and it talks about how there are the terrorists which carried out the attack used a passport farm. So they actually recycled each other's passports and visas to get into restricted spaces like the airport and then hijack a plane. So the recommendation here is that the US border security system should be integrated into a larger network of screening points that includes our transportation system and access to vital facilities such as nuclear reactors. So this is just one component of this overarching strategy. A lot of the things that suck about today come from the changes recommended in this 9/11 Commission report. So you know exactly who to blame. This biometric screening system is a large part of this, but what we're talking about today is the Real ID Act, which is, it's not exactly a digital ID, but it also kind of is. So I'll tell you what I mean by that. One, there is not a chip. There is not a literal chip in these IDs. I've looked at a number of IDs. There are things called enhanced IDs that have a chip in them, but for the most part, most of these IDs do not have a chip. What is a requirement with the Real ID is these special requirements right here. So on every driver's license, it should have the person's full legal name, date of birth, gender, all these things, physical security features. So you'll see some holographic inserts that have the person's face next to it, and a common machine readable technology. So I don't think that this is a chip at this point. I think that this is a code, or even being able to read the text off the card, which is something that happens with passports as well. And the most important part is these issuance standards. So it's not that the ID changed, but it's the information that it's tied to. So this is in the other requirements section of the Real ID Act. So to meet the requirements, you shall adopt the following practice, and this is the digital ID part: to employ technology to capture digital images of identity source documents so images can be transferred, and also subject each person applying for a driver's license or identification card to a mandatory facial image capture. So I've gotten reports from the ground in the several states where this is required, which is namely Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Texas, Wyoming. All of these states are now requiring you to undergo facial recognition in order to get one of these IDs. So it's kind of a digital ID, it kind of isn't. And what's important is it's completely unconstitutional for you to be forced to use it. So Citizens Council for Health Freedom published a really awesome page with info on how to use to avoid using a Real ID, and the answer is to use a passport. So you can use a passport and to fly, and there's also a 2-year period where nothing's going to happen if you have your standard ID. Now, if you need to do a renewal and you're in one of these states, you're kind of out of luck. You're going to have to use a passport when you fly. Also, in my research, I found that the passport does traditionally have a chip in it. Most passports have chips in it, and there is ID information encoded onto that. It's nothing that you couldn't read off the passport itself, but this just shows you that's exactly what they scan when you're traveling in and out of the country, and there is a historical record of where you've been. All right, so Apple is paying out $95 million for listening to your drug deals and for listening to people having sex. Comes from a class action lawsuit, Lopez versus Apple, filed in California federal court, and it's receiving, Apple did not admit to any wrongdoing, but it is paying out a $95 million settlement. That's about $100 per person in this settlement. And the major proof that this lawsuit cites is that there was a whistleblower, this is an article published on The Guardian, that is a third-party contractor which reviews all of the audio data coming out of Siri to make sure it matches up with what the person asked. And so this person said, hey, a lot of the time we were actually listening to recordings of couples having sex, confidential medical information, and even drug deals right there. So all of these things were happening when people were using Siri, and the article goes on to say, this whistleblower goes on to say that a lot of things could accidentally trigger the "Hey Siri" code word, and that's how these recordings were captured. But also, there's not really any telling how these recordings were activated. They went on to say that the devices that captured the most false positive data or started recording without consent were the Apple Watch and also the Apple smart home speakers. So if you have any of those and you're going around, you're doing sensitive stuff, hey, that's letting you know that's all being recorded. All right, you crypto bros, you might have gotten this letter called Notice 6174A, and this is from the IRS, and you get it when you essentially lied on your taxes, or the IRS thinks you lied on your taxes. Well, how do they know? This is specifically the box saying, have you dealt with any cryptocurrency in this past year, in this tax year? A lot of people just leave that box blank, or they mark no, and that's why the IRS started to get more information about cryptocurrency users in the US. Back in 2017, Coinbase gave the info of 14,000 accounts to the IRS. That includes information like your social security number, name, birth date, address, account records. And they were also even asking for copies of the accounts themselves, copies of the IDs, and the Bitcoin wallets and total transaction history. But this was denied by the court that forced Coinbase to give this information up. Now, why are they doing this? Because the IRS is sad. Only 800 to 900 people in the entire US had reported using Bitcoin for the 2013 to 2015 tax years. So this is from This is from CoinDesk, and specifically one of the leaders of the class action lawsuit, James Harper. He's a lawyer and a Bitcoin researcher, and then he is accusing them of improper overreach, which is very unconstitutional. But still, this just goes to show that if you are using a third-party platform, you're using a custodial wallet like Coinbase, which has your keys, they have your personal information, they're just going to give it off whenever they feel scared. Now, Coinbase has gone ahead and filed a brief. Now they're firing back at the IRS, saying that the court should protect Americans' privacy interests in digital information. There's something called the third party doctrine, which means that if it's housed by a third party, it can't actually be, it can't automatically be taken without a warrant. It can't just be grabbed en masse. So if you are using Coinbase, or if you are using a third party exchange, your information isn't safe. I would withdraw everything and put it on a different wallet. One wallet that I really like is Stack Wallet. It's a really private Bitcoin and Monero wallet built on open source technology and super easy to use. So check that out. It's the one I recommend. Let's move on to our next story. We're going to hear about the Google antitrust lawsuit. Now, this is pretty crazy. This is the Department of Justice's lawsuit against Google. And so this is something that's been going on since 2020, when the Department of Justice was investigating Google for anti-competitive behavior in their search engine. And what they found was they were paying off their competitors to have a stakehold in other browsers like Mozilla Firefox. They were paying Firefox $500 million for that. They were paying $1 billion a year to Apple to be the default search on Apple devices, and they also had both sides of the market. So Google's DoubleClick is for website publishers, and Google had about 90% of that market share. So if you own a website, 90% of website owners were using DoubleClick for ads. At the same time, it also had about half of the market share for the ad exchange. So advertisers half of the time were using Google's ad exchange. So they had both sides of the market locked down, and this is why Google's advertising business is its most profitable business, search included. This is also why people are seeing that Google's search results are going downhill. And some people think that this is happening on purpose. There was internal documents leaked from Google of the Google search team, the Google Ads team freaking out about not hitting their revenue numbers as a publicly shared company. So they threw around the idea of actually making search worse, which the search team pushed back against. But hey, we do see that people feel that Google's search results have gotten a lot worse, and when Google search results get a lot worse, you have to click through more pages, you have to see more ads. So that is that's pretty insidious way to get you to see more ads. There are more parts to this. Google has made its own recommendations, because part of the remedies, which in this part of the case, the antitrust case, you're actually going to see different parts of Google being sold off to people the Department of Justice approves of. And many people in the court proceedings like Yahoo and OpenAI were more than willing to buy some of Google's most valuable assets, such as the Google Chrome web browser and web browsing engine, which is a massive beast, right? This is what 90% of people use to browse the web. They either use Google Chrome, or they use something like Brave, Edge, or something else based off of Google Chrome. So they are thinking about getting Chrome or Google to sell off its Chrome browser, and they're also wanting to prevent Google from making search deals with web browsers like Firefox. They're also thinking about forcing Google to sell off its Android operating system. Now, this is what Google argues. They say that this would make it harder for people to use Google search, even if they wanted to. Now, I think that's ridiculous, because we're seeing that Google search is falling apart, and we haven't even given people a choice. Most people are still using Google search. So I'm hoping that we have a good resolution to this, but also the resolution is really, really easy. The resolution is, as soon as you open up the browser, literally just give people the choice to pick their search engine. That's it. That's literally it. And create an open system for people to submit their search engines, to have a search engine registry. And then it's all fair. The user can pick from their own search engine. They could force Google to do this. They don't need to force Google to sell off its browser. I think that if they do sell off their browser, it would make things worse. We can look back to the other antitrust lawsuit, which was of AT&T in 1982. And AT&T was providing phone service to 90% of the households in the US. It was the largest company in the world at the time. And so they broke up AT&T Bell, Ma Bell, into Baby Bells, and these regional companies, broke it up to regional companies, which ended up being bought up by other bigger companies. In fact, one of the Baby Bells, Southwestern Bell, ended up going back to buy AT&T for $60 billion. So this doesn't actually help anyone. It just creates an oligopoly. Instead of one big company to rule them all, now there's several major phone providers, and none of them are private. So this isn't about breaking up a monopoly. It's a power game that's being played in the hopes of creating more of an oligopoly and making room for the rising big tech companies like OpenAI. Now, that would be the worst thing in my mind if OpenAI collaborated with Google, because then you would have AI in the browser and there wouldn't be an escape to it. So again, people could just show a pop-up when opening up their web browser for the first time, or even when opening up their Android phone. And I do think that Google will be forced to share ownership of their browser with another company. I don't know what yet, but I do think that this will take years because Google Chrome is a massive, massive project and really hard to maintain. There are things you can do right away. You can start using different search engines. This is our search engine. This is called, this is a software called SearchX. It's a search engine that lets you search other search engines. So here you can actually go in and pick the search engines you want to enable. You can see Bing, Brave, DuckDuckGo, Google. So you can enable these, you can disable these, and if you search for SearchX, you will also see public instances. Now, if you want access to this private instance, you could go to abovephone.com/suite to get access to all these different privacy services here, including the search engine. And then there's also public providers that are available. Now, all this being said, the browser landscape is quite dry. If Google Chrome gets bought up, there's not many other browsers we can turn to. Even both Mozilla and Google say Mozilla Firefox will fall apart if Google isn't able to pay it $500 million a year. There are alternative browsers like there's FireDragon. There's also another browser named Ladybird from Fudo that's in development, but nothing quite yet that's going to replace Google Chrome completely, which is very, very unfortunate. So our last story for today is a really important one. This is about the atomic swaps. These are being able to convert your Bitcoin into Monero one way without having to trust a third party. So this is called Unstoppable Swap. You can go to unstoppableswap.net. You can download their application. It works on everything. Works on Apple, works on Windows. And if you download this, you can actually convert your Bitcoin into Monero without having to trust a third party. It uses cryptography to lock up the different parties' funds and only to release them when they're both in their correct place or verify they're correct. Then the funds can unlock and get sent to an output address. So this is a really, really cool piece of software that I've been messing around with. It works. It is in early development, but it does work. And you can go look at the source code on GitHub. So this is called Unstoppable Swaps. I do want to thank you for joining me. It's been about 23 minutes, so I think that this is going to be a 25-minute show. But I want to know, what do you think of today's show? Did you like the stories? Do you think that we went through them too fast, too slow? Let me know your thoughts. Give us a shout out. Again, we are live on takebackourtech.org. You can always listen to this podcast there. Please do sign up to our email list as well. We're also on Substack. That's tbot.substack.com. We are also on Odyssey, odyssey.com. Search for us there. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I hope you use these solutions and use them for good. Until next time, always remember, our connection is sacred. Peace.